Hello, everybody. It's Dr. Eric Balkavage, and we are back for the Thyroid Answers podcast. I have with me, of course, as usual, my partner in crime, Dr. Erica Riggleman, live from Winchester, Virginia, correct?
Yes.
You're having a lovely day in Winchester, Virginia?
It's always a wonderful day.
That's awesome. So today, guys, we have a special guest on the Thyroid Answers podcast, and it is a person I had a chance to meet at the most recent ShyCon conference. And this is Dr. Maggie Ruiz-Paedae. I didn't want to make sure I didn't mess that up, but she and I met at the most recent ShyCon conference. We had a great conversation, and I thought she'd be a great person to have on the podcast. She's a fellow functional medicine practitioner, and she's a fellow medical technologist. We both have a background in medical technology. That's what I originally went to school for. Thinking that I was I went to school for medical technology because I couldn't get the business classes because I transferred colleges. So I asked for what major does nobody take? And they told me medical technology. So I said, well, I'll take that as my major. And here we are now, right? And so we both have that background in medical technology. We both do functional medicine along with Dr. Eric Riggleman. And we both have this kind of bond with what's happening with genomic medicine and epigenetics and gluten and gaps. So this should be a really good podcast because we're all talking really about the same stuff. And especially for our thyroid patients, we're talking about how can we give answers to the people, doctors, and people that listen to the podcast for the questions they have about thyroid physiology. So let me do a little formal introduction on Dr. Maggie. And she has a master's in medical technology. She's a doctor of Oriental medicine. She's a certified herbalist. She is a functional medicine practitioner. She's certified GAPS practitioner, and I'll let her explain what that means in a little bit. She has multiple gluten certifications, much like I know Eric and I both are certified gluten coaches. She worked 6 years in a children's hospital working with AIDS and leukemia patients and trained as an MD, although she didn't do the residency, so she is not licensed as an MD. It was for the knowledge only. The majority of her patients now are critically ill. Although her passion is prevention, she does a lot of reversing these chronic health illnesses. So without any further ado, Dr. Maggie, how are you today?
I'm great. Here in sunny Florida.
Yes, it is sunny in Pennsylvania, and I'm sure it's always sunny in Winchester, Virginia, right?
Yes.
Yes.
So, Maggie, can you give us like a little background, your own little background of how you got into this functional medicine piece and what kind of drove you to want to help people with chronic health issues?
Well, I first became a medical technologist because I did not want to be a doctor.
Okay, fair enough.
But I think God had other plans. And then as so many of us came into the functional medicine world because of a personal health experience.
Right.
So I was extremely ill in my 30s. I had anxiety and depression, high blood pressure, psoriasis, gut issues. I was on 5 different antidepressants. And it wasn't fun. So one day I thought, well, I'm not even 40 years old yet, and I'm taking like 10 different meds. Is this going to be for the rest of my life? And Western medicine was my world at the time. I was married to a surgeon, and all my friends were doctors, so I didn't think any other way. I thought functional medicine was this magic thing that didn't work until it cured me. And it was my thyroid that was the biggest issue. That's why I had the anxiety and depression and everything that went along with it. But the root cause, as we all like to figure out the root cause of every single one of our patients, was that I was an undiagnosed celiac.
Ah.
And there was that molecular mimicry going on with my thyroid. So I had antibodies in the 300s.
Oh, wow.
And all my levels were off. And I'm happy to report that today I no longer have any antibodies.
Awesome.
That's awesome.
And reverse my Hashimoto's, which people say you cannot do that, but we all know that you can. Reverse my psoriasis. I have more energy now than I ever have my entire life. My brain is clear now. I used to have lots of foggy thinking. to the point where I just keep getting more and more degrees because I love studying. So having done that, then of course you feel like you need to tell the world that they do not need to be sick, that you could take control of your health, and that it's in your food.
Yeah.
It's not your drug. I wasn't deficient in Prozac. But I was deficient in something.
Yeah. So, and that's a huge point, right? So disease and symptoms and chronic health issues aren't a normal part of aging. They're not a normal part of life.
They're not, but they make us think that it is, kind of like dementia and Alzheimer. They make us think that that's normal. And you look at other societies, other countries, and it's not.
Right. And it's unique to the U.S. And unfortunately, we are a small percentage of the U.S. population. I think we're about 5% of the U.S. or the world population, and yet we consume somewhere arguably between 60 and 70% of the world's pharmaceuticals. So we've tried our best to drug ourselves healthy, and it's failed miserably because we're one of the sickest, fattest countries in the world. And we have more chronic illness here than almost anywhere else. So.
Yeah, we are number one in something, and that is drug consumption.
Yeah,
it definitely is. You can definitely hear the passion in your voice when it comes to, not only getting your health back, but to, helping other people and spreading that word, because there are so many sick people out there. Having it personally affect you being celiac, how did you go about discovering that you had celiac, and how do you go about helping your patients discover if they're one of those people that have an issue with gluten as well?
That's a great question, because there's so many undiagnosed celiacs. I think it was a report I read recently for the World Health Organization, which they're placing celiacs worldwide as 5% of the population. We tend to think it's about 1%. And the NIH also came out with the same statistics of 5% of the population worldwide. And for every one celiac diagnosed, there's 18 not diagnosed. Wow. And the average age is over 50. And usually by then you have no villi left. So finally, after your 10th biopsy, intestinal biopsy, they find that it's all gone, which is what I see with my patients. I saw one patient who had 14 biopsies. Wow.
Yeah.
Or intestinal biopsies. And I always say, okay, equate that to the Sahara Desert. If the Martians landed on the Sahara Desert, they would say there were no earthlings.
Right.
So if you don't have complete erosion of your small intestine, how many biopsies are they going to take until they find a spot that indeed there were no villi?
Right.
So that's kind of like the old way of diagnosing celiac. And luckily, I never went that route. I finally diagnosed myself with the HLA-DQ test, with the genetic test. And that is the only test that I run on my patients for celiac. Because celiac is an autoimmune genetic disease. So if you don't have the gene, you're not going to develop celiac.
Right. And I think we got a couple of issues there. One is in some paradigms, the thought process is there isn't a problem of a gluten or immune response until we actually see overt disease. And we know that that's just the case. The disease is the end game, right? That's what happens after years of dysfunction, years of irritation, years of immune dysregulation. Then we see the disease. So in the functional medicine model, and this is important to explain to our listeners and our viewers, is that in the functional medicine model, we're trying to optimize the health and the function of the person. What happens many times in conventional medicine is their basis in their teaching was to address the disease or manage the symptoms or manage the disease. It's not about optimizing health. So many physicians that people are going to see don't really have a background in optimization. They don't have tools or a tool belt to evaluate somebody from a function status. They only have the tools to evaluate them from a disease status. And if we look at things like the Rome guidelines, when it comes to GI issues, they will tell you that, if you look through that algorithm, they'll say if this test is negative, then it's a functional problem. But then it's empty, right? You have a functional problem, treat symptoms. Well, if it's a functional problem, why don't we run functional testing in conventional medicine? It's just not part of the teaching. It's not part of the treatment paradigm. And so that's why there's such a difference. That's why somebody can struggle with celiac disease or the symptoms of celiac disease for years on end because the overt disease and pathology is just not there yet. And it may take 8-9 years till they get that right little snippet of tissue that they get it, right? So that's awesome.
I also think it's hard because a lot of people who have celiac don't have digestive symptoms either. They may have neurological symptoms or skin issues, and that often they look at the symptoms and say, well, you can't possibly have it, so they don't even run the testing to even evaluate.
Actually,
that.
70% of celiacs have no gut issue.
Wow.
The number one symptom is depression.
Yeah.
And a big symptom is infertility.
Mm-hmm.
Infertility, miscarriages. I've had patients that had the IVF and finally got pregnant, and then I run the celiac test and it's positive. I mean, we've got to remember that fallopian tubes also have villi.
Yeah.
So if the villi in the small intestine, and the enterocytes is gone, it could be that the fallopian tubes don't have the relay system anymore because that villi is also gone. But I say they're looking for zebras and don't look for horses.
Right. Yeah. There's an old joke about that, but we won't bring that up here, and I'm not sure it should be up here. But I think that's really key, and both points are really really important. That it is so many people don't have overt GI symptoms where they go, oh, that's a celiac symptom, right? Even the doctors don't know. People go in, even if they do have symptoms, headaches, depression, whatever. The focus, because it's a functional disorder early on, the doctors treat the symptoms, not looking for celiac as the overt issue. And unfortunately, for so many people, the easy answer is, hey, just don't eat gluten, right? And docs, you see this with people in conventional medicine. Often the docs will say, keep eating the gluten until we see the celiac disease. Once we see the celiac disease, then we can diagnose you, and then you should stop eating it. Well, wait, what?
Yes.
What does that mean, right? We can keep punching you in the head until we diagnose you with a concussion. Then you have the brain damage, right? Until then, you're allowed to get punched in the head as many times as you want.
And it's kind of even some of the functional medicine doctors kind of err as well when it comes to diagnosis, because they're also looking for that one test that's going to say, my patient has this diagnosis. For example, they do the TTG or the IgA, and that's inflammation. What if you're not that far gone yet? What if you're just starting to manifest? You're not going to have a positive test. Or they do the gliadin. So what if you're not allergic to gliadin, but you're allergic to all the other, 1,200 grains? So that's why I go for genetics, because genetics doesn't lie. You either have the probability of developing the disease or you don't. But then, so I find, okay, here's the gene. Now what do we do? Because that's also going to be only 10% of my patient's probability. So, well, now we go to epigenetics, which is even more important. But my son is also a great example of that, because he was very, very ill since he was 16. I mean, endoscopies, colonoscopies, because, his dad was a surgeon, so we went that route. And he was full-blown celiac. And right now he's doing wonderfully. He's 35 years old, and he's extremely healthy. But he was housebound for almost a year. He couldn't leave the house. It was bad.
Yeah, it can be pretty devastating. And even for the people that don't have the genetics for celiac disease, if they're sensitive or reactive to gluten, it can be devastating for their health and well-being. And it can trigger things like thyroid issues. It can trigger almost any immune dysregulation, which could wind up being almost any autoimmune disorder in time. So
that's a great point, Eric, because 97% of celiacs have the gene, but 3% do not. And they are celiacs.
Right. So there's a small percentage of people that can have it, and there's a large percentage of people that don't have the genetics for celiac, but have a host of other immunity.
Well, and the test has the other 4 alleles. So there's 2 alleles that are going to be, the 2 and 8, HLA-DQ 2 and 8. Those 2 alleles are going to say yay or nay for celiac, but then there's 4 more alleles. And the person can have full-blown, but it'll be non-celiac gluten sensitivity.
Absolutely.
But then on top of that, there's 3% that have none of the alleles or the gene, but they do have celiac. Yeah. So we only know the tip of the iceberg, right?
Maybe on a good day, right?
And that's all I realize every day. I learn so much, and I'm like, I know nothing. I have so much to learn.
I think the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know, right?
Yes.
I think when we were, I took my first functional medicine class, and I learned that stuff, and I got it. I thought, man, this is it. And that's, if you stop there, you'd be the smartest guy in the room, because you'd say, I have it all. But the more you study, especially as you start to look at the genetics and the pathway planners that we really start, all of us have started investing in, we really start to see that we really don't know that much. I was reading a paper today on thyroid receptor function and the different types of receptors at each different cell and the combination of it. It was a paper really kind of reviewing what Eric and I talk about all the time, is cellular hypothyroidism versus glandular hypothyroidism. And they start talking about thyroid receptors and all the repressors and co-activators and all the stuff. And really what the synopsis of the paper was, TSH and T4 values and what's in the serum really means nothing. Everything is at the cellular level, and we are just barely understanding what's happening at the cellular level, right? So we just know a teeny fraction.
And how do we get it to the cellular level? Well, we have to eat it.
We have to have healthy, and that goes back to having healthy lifestyles, right? And healthy lifestyle and health and our epigenetic factors are a primary for so many issues. Like even for celiac disease, whether it's or Hashimoto's or any immune or autoimmune disorder, I'm sure, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, how do we get people who are chronically ill better? We have to start with some of those basic foundational concepts.
It's actually very simple.
Right.
You forget everything and you go to basics.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
How do you make a wonderful, sturdy building? You go to the foundation. Foundation. If you don't fix foundation, you don't move. You've got to go there first, and that is the gut.
Yeah.
I think that's absolutely key. And a lot of times when patients come in, they want to be working on the roof, but I got to make them realize that your foundation is crumbling. We've got to fix this at a foundational level. Often patients come in and they're like, I've got MTHFR, I've got this genetic stuff. And I'm like, your diet's terrible. You've got infections. You've got all this other stuff that the genes, they matter, but we've got to work on all this stuff first. And it's sometimes a struggle to make them realize that stuff needs to be fixed first. And then we can work on all the other stuff.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You talk about the roof. They want to paint and put the curtains on, and they want to put all the accoutrements inside, and it doesn't even have drywall yet. We have to whip through all that stuff. So that's a great analogy, Erica. I mean, but yeah, people, and it's not their fault. It's not people's fault. They don't feel well. They're educated by TV, by big media, big pharma, now big internet, that you get all these, hey, this is the secret. If you do these two things, or I have the secret supplement to fix this. There are no secret supplements. There are no secret things. All the things to really help people is a better, healthy diet, lifestyle, sleep habits, breathing habits. They're not sexy. There may not be the real cool things to do, and most people could do a lot of those things on their own and get better. They at least should be doing them before they come find us. But people are lost in general, and they spend too much time with Dr. Internet many times searching for the thing that's going to fix them, and it just doesn't work. So
no, and I always say, okay, so you found this testimony on a website, and it worked for that person. Yeah. But that person is not you. We have to see your uniqueness. It's not just your physical makeup. It's your spiritual makeup. It's your psychological makeup. It's all of you that makes a human being. There are cures, and I use the word cure, and I'm not afraid to use the word cure in my practice, although we're not supposed to use the word cure, right? That there were cures, and I don't cure anything, but you can. You can heal yourself. The power's in your hands, and everything is already on this earth that you need to heal yourself. We just have to figure out what it is. So, no, I don't have a fancy supplement. You don't leave my office with 20 supplements. You might leave my office the first day with 2 supplements. That's it. Some, multi-mineral, which everybody's deficient in multi-minerals, and, CoQ10 with an ADH so that they can have a little energy. So, but until we go and fix that gut, and I draw pictures for my patients. I have a blackboard in my office. I draw out the enterocytes. I teach them about zonulin. Because I want them to understand. I don't want them to do something because I told them to do it. I wanted to understand why we're doing it. Then they'll comply. So my visits are super long, an hour and a half, but it works. They comply. And then I'm available 24 hours a day for my patients. It gets a little overwhelming. I used to remember all their names and didn't need my history in front of them, but now I don't. I mean, now there are too many of them. But I'm still available via email. They text me. It's that type of medicine, Erica. We have to be available that way.
Yeah, and I think that everybody finds their groove in this and what's the best way to help and help their patient base. But I think your thought process, Dr. Erica's process, my process is the same. Treat our patients like we'd want to be treated.
Absolutely.
The solution is not 20 supplements. I know I'm a minimalist as much as possible. There are times you have to give people a bunch of stuff. If you have to try and kill a bunch of organisms or you have leaky gut issues, you have to give a little bit more. And we try and get them moving along as fast as they can. But our job really is to help people live better lives and lifestyles so that we don't have to treat them for the rest of their life. And I say to my patients all the time, I like you. You're a great person. I love talking to you, but I really don't want to talk to you for the rest of my life. I don't. I want to talk to you periodically, maybe, but I don't want to be talking to you every week for the rest of my life. And I don't.
Yes.
Because that we'll all go crazy because I am not that interesting, right?
I graduate my patients. I'm not sure you're going to have an open house and you're going to have all my graduates wear little graduation hats. I say, okay, you're graduated. I don't have to see you again. What? You don't have to see me again. No, I taught you what to do and you're fine now. So yes, stay in touch, but I don't have to see you again.
That's awesome. I love that.
So when you let's talk a little bit because we know that a lot of our thyroid patients have celiac disease. A lot of celiac patients have thyroid issues. And I know you mentioned that, being gluten-free for real as something that's real important. So why don't you talk about what that means? Because I know there's a lot of people that think that they can just be gluten light if they have immune or autoimmune issues. I always say it's like being a little pregnant.
That's what I use. You can't be a little pregnant. I use it all the time.
Right. So how do you go about educating your patients on how to be gluten-free for real?
Okay. So don't kill the messenger. I know there are people out there listening that are going to go, what? Rice has gluten?
Right.
I teach them what is, first of all, what is gluten? Gluten really doesn't exist. There's no such thing as gluten. Gluten is a combination of a pearlamine with the glutamine. When they come together, they're not water soluble and they make gluten in the bread.
Right.
So in a nutshell, you have the storage proteins, the globulins, the albumins, the glutamines, and the prolamines. And every grain has one or the other. We are more familiar with the glutamines and the prolamines because those are in the grains that we use basically to feed the world. And those are alcohol soluble. That's why they make such great dough. But when we think of grains, we have to go back to the beginning of where is their family, where is their genus. So the monocotyledone family or the monocots are the genus, and then there are different families. The postcell family is the family of grains. So if they're in that family, they're going to have a prolamine or a glutamine. The one that we know more of is gliadin, which is the prolamine in wheat. So technically, every grain is going to have one or the other or both because it's in the endosperm. And that is what's going to give them life, what's going to give the plant life. I know I got a little...
No, that's okay. I think for the listeners, I think one of the things we can just kind of summarize that, and then I'll let you keep going, is almost any grain-based substance, if you have sensitivity to the gliadins or gluten or these glutenish type proteins, a lot of the grain-based products have similar protein components to them. So
Absolutely.
if you're sensitive to a grain, you may be sensitive to all the grains or multiple different grains, not just a wheat-based grain, right?
Absolutely. And then there are degrees, kind of like a dimmer switch. So say wheat, 69% of the protein is going to be gliadin, but rice is only going to be 5%. So the prolamine in rice is called orsenin. The one in corn is called CN. Oats also has it. Rice, teff, sorghum, every grain has it. So with me personally, my most sensitive one is rice. which is awful because, as you can tell, I have an accent. I'm Cuban. So I grew up on rice, and I lived on rice and Cuban bread. Give me a break. So that's why I was so ill. So but I can't even eat my mom's cooking anymore because, she cooks rice. So if I have a hidden source of rice that night, I will know. I won't tell you what it does to me because it's not pretty. But it saddens me because I can't have any rice. So I find substitutes for rice. But there are the celiacs that do really well, or just anyone who does really well when they stop eating the legal definition of gluten, which is no wheat, barley, oats, or rye. That's why they can get away with saying they're gluten-free on the label.
Right.
Try to find a gluten-free label that has no rice in it.
Right.
It's practically impossible. Mm-hmm. So they do better because it's less of an insult. Obviously, they got rid of a lot of bad food, but they still are not well because they're having the quinoa. They go to quinoa thinking that it's gluten-free, and they get flare-ups. So, doc, I'm gluten-free, but I still don't feel completely well. Well, that's because you really are not gluten-free. So let's take you to the next level. And that is a passion of mine, to educate doctors, especially, on what is really gluten-free.
Right. Now, some people would say, Dr. Maggie, come on. Grains are important. We need to eat 8 to 10 to 12 servings of grains a day to be healthy. And if you take grains away, people are going to be chronically ill and they're going to be fat because they're going to eat a lot of fat. What do you say to that?
Okay, Mr. Pyramid. I say grains are not what grains used to be. Grains are now, most of them are GMO, first of all, or genetically engineered. And if you look at a label, get a bag of rice. It'll say fortified with, because there's nothing in it anymore. They have to add minerals and vitamins to it. Fortified with iron, fortified with minerals, they're fortified. The wheat plant itself, that it's only 3 feet tall now.
Right. It's amphibians of grain, right?
Right. And we used to eat grains very differently. We used to ferment them. There was no refrigeration. So when you ferment a grain, kind of like the sourdough bread, if it's real sourdough bread and you ferment it for 48 hours, it will not have any gluten.
Right.
So we don't eat grains the way we used to. And I've even read reports on how grains in other countries are different than our grains. I have patients who can tolerate foods, say when they go to Italy, but they can't when they're in the United States, the same food.
Right. And we talked
about glyphosate might have something to do with that, right, Eric?
What's that? Glyphosate? Yeah, I was just going to say that. We talked about this on an earlier podcast, and you mentioned it, that you heard me talk about it. And that is that a lot of the crops in the U.S. are sprayed with Roundup, which has the chemical glyphosate in it. And Monsanto will tell us that glyphosate is safe for human beings to eat. Although if you do get it on your skin or in your eyes, you are to go wash it out and go to as fast as you can to the emergency room. But it's okay to eat it. So I like that part. But the issue is that it may not actually kill us, but what it does do is it disrupts the something called the Shikimate pathway that the gut bacteria utilize to help us make nutrients. I mean, it's critical that we have healthy gut flora, and unfortunately, the glyphosate disrupts this pathway that the organisms have, but we don't have, called the Shikimate pathway. So that's probably a huge component as well. And in a lot of the European countries, they've banned glyphosate usage. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's a huge reason why people are less sensitive in other countries, but we're way more sensitive here.
So when I heard Eric use that word, I knew he was the guy. I'm very familiar with the Shikimate pathway because of Dr. Seneff. So I like listening, studying with Dr. Seneff, and she has tons of research on that, but no one really has heard of it. So Eric mentioned it in another path. I'm like, that's it. He's the genius. I knew that I loved him the minute I saw him because of that.
I don't know about the genius, but I did win my wife over with the word Shikimate. I think that's
there you go. See, and something very important about that Shikimate pathway is that we don't make our tryptophan, tyrosine, or methionine. It's made by the bacteria in our guts, and those are essential amino acids. So we get rid of those bacteria that make those, and we have none of our own.
Absolutely.
And that was a loophole. That was how they got it approved, like you said. They proved it would not hurt humans.
Right. but indirectly, and there's another issue, right? If you don't have tryptophan, you can't make serotonin in the gut. Serotonin helps with motility in the bowel. Now you have reduced motility. Now when you have reduced motility, bacteria, your food starts to get fermented, bacteria overgrow. Now we have chronic gut infections, and now we trigger autoimmunity, and the whole works. So, yeah, is Monsanto responsible for the massive jump in autoimmunity in this country, potentially?
Yes.
Possibly, right?
I'm going to say yes. You're going to be a little more diplomatic. But, plants also have that pathway, too. So they're killing our plants, and they're killing our gut flora, and that's 90% of our immune system.
Yeah.
That's huge.
Yeah. And I think hopefully in time, we in the United States will become a little bit more cognizant of what's going on. We have to start following other countries' leads that this stuff is nasty stuff. It shouldn't be sprayed on the food we're eating. But there's a huge lobby in the U.S., so it's not going to be an easy road to get there.
No, and I hope it's not too late by the time they actually realize it for a lot of people, because so many people are sick because of this and creating that autoimmunity. And we know what autoimmunity does to not only the people who have it, but in 2015 they showed that women who have Hashimoto's, autoimmunity, that they have an 80% increase in having a child that has autism. I know with your history or your background with autism, do you often see that where the children who have autism, that the mothers also have autoimmunity, specifically Hashimoto's?
I always say there is no autistic child born from a healthy mom. Every single one of my moms are also ill. They come to me because I'm a gut practitioner, but obviously I end up treating the moms. I always end up treating the entire family. Even if they're not the patient right in front of me, because the changes are going to affect the entire family. Moms don't have time to cook 2 or 3 different meals. So they'll start reporting, I'm sleeping better, I'm having better bowel movements. And my visit, I'm going to ask questions about other family members as well. I need to see the home environment. Mm-hmm. But yes, absolutely, Erica, you're right about that. And Eric, I have yet to see one child autistic without the MTHFR gene. So far, 100% of them have it. Amy Jasko also has the same findings. 100% of them have it.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty common. And if you have folate deficiencies, mom had folate issues probably, going into it. You've got all the other toxicity issues coming into a birth. I mean, the probability of having an injured child at this point, with the toxicity of our environment, the nutritional deficiencies, the diet that we see people on today, it's not I don't think it should be a surprise that we have the explosion of neurologic developmental problems that we do. It should be like, look what we're doing.
Right.
When most people are thinking about getting pregnant, they're not thinking about their state of health. They're thinking about, the last cocktail they had and are they going to get lucky tonight, right? That's what they're really thinking about. And their state of health going into it, in most situations, is not very good. So,
yeah, especially if they're having difficulty getting pregnant. I said, your body is telling you something. It's telling you you're not ready to make that life. So let's take care of you first, and then you can have a healthy baby. I've also seen a lot of young adults injured with the Gardasil vaccine. I'm treating 2 boys right now that were vaccine injured with Gardasil, wow, which we shouldn't be giving it to boys in the first place, but that's for another topic, right?
Right.
But this young woman has a child already with a learning disability, and she's vaccine injured with Gardasil, and she's insisting that she wanted to get pregnant. So I said, give me 90 days.
Yeah.
And she's like, no. And she came back for the follow-up, and she was pregnant.
Yeah. And you feel for, to some degree, you feel for them. I understand, people want to be parents. They want to be moms. They want to do this thing. They feel it in their heart that it's something they want to do. But I really urge my patients, and I'm sure both of you guys do that with your own, is the best thing you can do for your children or child is to get yourself as healthy as possible. And it's not by a standard blood test that your conventional medical doctor ran. You really need to look at functional markers. Get yourself not within lab range, but within optimal range, before going for pregnancy. And it goes not just for mom, but also for dad. The importance of dad is really important as well. Dads sometimes are off the hook because it's usually we consider mom as the potential problem, but dads can be as much of a factor as mom in why there's challenges with getting pregnant. So I think it's really important that we start making helping our patients that we come to see and the community that we're not seeing understand how important healthy lifestyle is if we want to slow down the amount of kids that we're putting out there with all of these neurodevelopmental disorders, autism, ADD, ADHD, Asperger's. I mean, this all stuff that's preventable if we just do a better job of taking care of ourselves and be more aware of what we're putting into our bodies before we get pregnant.
We've got to get our hands on the young women and make them healthy first. And that's all very important because they're going to share their gut flora with mom. Mm-hmm. And when the baby travels through the birth canal, that is how he's going to obtain his immune system. So I was wanting my patient to at least do an organic acid test just to check her flora.
Yeah.
I'm going to try to help her whenever I can.
Yeah, I saw a paper that came out not too long ago that said in utero, as the baby is developing, mom is already establishing appropriate flora. So it is in utero during development that gut flora is developing. Most people, even in functional medicine, we think about, okay, it's during that birth process and coming through the canal and breastfeeding, but really mom's flora before that and during the developmental stage, that flora is being established. So it can be compromised right off the bat, essentially.
Right off the bat.
So let's talk about some key things. I know one of the things that it's really important we talk about is MTHFR. We talk about that in our world with our association, all three of us with Dr. Ben Lynch. He's a good friend of mine and been a great mentor to me. I know both of you guys are following some of Dr. Lynch's work, but if you can, there's almost two divides now in this kind of world of genomic medicine, right? We have the one camp where we have people that say, if you have this gene SNP, you need to take this supplement because you're always going to need it for the rest of your life. And there's reporting systems out there that just don't do injustice. And then there's other camps, and I know I'm pretty confident we're all in the same camp, is that knowing somebody's genetics is nice to know, but we don't want to treat genetics. We don't want to treat symptoms. We don't want to treat big diagnoses. We want to help patients, and so we can't just treat that. So, Dr. Maggie, if you will, talk about a little bit about what your stance is on MTHFR and genomic medicine, how you help people who come to you with their genetic report or I have MTHFR. What's your stance on how you like to help those type of people?
First of all, ShyCon 2017 was off the chart.
Nice.
It was wonderful, and you did an amazing job
Thank you.
Keeping everything under control. So the Human Genome Project, you guys, I'm sure, are very familiar with that.
Yeah.
And we were shocked to find out that we have about 22 to 25,000 genes, right?
Right.
And that the fruit fly has about 21. And that the pufferfish has 27. So we have a little less genes in the pufferfish, which means, are they that important? Well, we were looking in the wrong place. And we do have about 25,000 human genes, but there's 100,000 microbial genes. So that's where our influence really is. And when they finished the Human Genome Project, they had the conclusion that only 5% of our genes code for proteins. So they thought they were going to find 100,000 because there's about 100,000 proteins.
Right.
And they were thinking each gene is going to code for a protein. Well, 5% only. So they had the audacity to say that 95% of the rest of our genes was junk DNA. Nice. God made a mistake, and 95% of our genes do nothing. But now they know that 90% controls the 5%.
Right.
So again, what controls the 95%? You do. So it comes down to you being in charge of controlling your genes. And you know how the genes are wrapped around the chromatin, and we can actually see that with certain types of testing that they do. So they have been able to see epigenetic markers on the chromatins directly on our genes. They call them tags. So you can develop these tags in utero or during your lifetime. Again, it brings the control to you. You control your genes. They're but the light bulb, but you have the switch. So that's what I try to instill in my patients. You have MTHFR, and I have the old chart in my office just to show them after I scare them and tell them there's going to be a quiz at the end of the at the end of my talk with it. I said, all I want you to remember is that the methylation cycle is not linear. There are 5 different cycles that are affected. If it was linear and something was wrong in number 3, I can give you number 3 and you can make 4, 5, and 6 and keep going. But it's not. So we can't intervene at this stage of the game, the initial consultation, with one supplement because upstream, I don't know what's going to stop. What if it stops, SAMe or your serotonin? We can't just intervene with a supplement. We have to intervene with your lifestyle. And that was one thing throughout the whole Shy concept 2017 that we kept hearing every day. And it was basics, basics, basics. Fix your patient's gut, fix your patient's lifestyle. Then you can tweak it with MTHFR.
So if somebody came to you with their genetic report and said, hey, I've got these genes, which supplements do I take? You're not the person who's going to say, okay, here's 6 supplement bottles and take these.
Absolutely not.
Yeah. Okay.
And something that I have found just with experience, I don't know if maybe you guys have seen this as well. Most patients with MTHFR do not convert the methylcobalamin to hydroxyl and adenosylcobalamin. So they have all these deficiency B12 symptoms, but I'll run the B12, blood work and it'll be super elevated, 3,000, 4,000. They're taking shots. So I say to them, it's hanging around. You're not converting it. Have you guys had experience seeing that?
Yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah, it's not unusual to see that. And it really still goes to the same philosophy we talk about with cellular hyperthyroidism, right? It's a matter of what's in the cell and doing work, not what's in the serum. The serum does not matter as much as what's happening at the cellular level. And we take a look at something like serum B12. Yeah, somebody who doesn't really understand that may say, well, you have plenty of
Right.
B12, right? Well, yeah, but it doesn't do me any good in the serum. It's just like having lots of T4 in the serum or lots of T3 in the serum. If it's not in the cell, it's not doing me any good. So that's where there's
history and symptoms always trump labs. What if they're normal? Okay, that's fine. But what is my patient showing? So one supplement that I do go to often is the hydroxycobalamin with the adenosylcobalamin, because that's going to help them right away.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that I like to do too. Is I like to challenge them based on their symptoms and their history with different forms of the supplements. Challenge them with it. Give them a couple days of hydroxy. Try hydroxy. Tell me what you feel and what you experience.
Right.
Here's the adeno, and we'll see markers on labs, and you'll see some indicators in history that maybe they may do better with hydroxy or adeno even before they do feel better with methyl. But I think the key is when we talk about people with genetic reports and SNPs is I think we're all in the same process, is that, yeah, you have genetic predispositions to have problems. We all do. It doesn't mean that they're manifesting. It doesn't mean it's a problem. It doesn't mean that you need to do anything. When people go to a website and they get a report and then they get a 20 supplement recommendation list based on
we started.
Or yeah.
The expensive pee that they're having.
So, and it can not only create, not only may it be a waste of money, but it actually can create a host of issues, right? Mm-hmm. And so none of us advocate that. And I want to make sure we bring that out, because even though people come to all 3 of us with for help with MTHFR and methylation and their genomic reports, and I had to create a video and put it on my website for people to say, hey, if you're coming to me for help with methylation, MTHFR, or your genetic report, this is what you should expect and this is what you should not expect. And I make sure that people watch that before they come. And if they're looking for something different than what I offer, I'm okay that we figure that out before they come. But we're all of the same guidance that you have to address the person before we start nitpicking with their genetics in 99% of the cases, right?
I do make sure that they leave knowing that the MTHFR is predisposed to them a little bit more to having high homocysteine. And what does that mean? Inflammation, and then the glutathione might be compromised. So ultimately, it comes down to inflammation and detoxing. So let's do an anti-inflammatory diet, and let's control as much toxicity as we can. The other thing that I never do with my patients is I do not detox them initially. That's the last thing I do. They already are struggling. So, where do you think your toxins are going to go when you do a detox? They're going to go into your bloodstream. You've got one more thing to deal with. So I don't believe in suffering through a process so that you can feel better at the end. We take it slow and we do it.
Right. And Dr. Erica, I mean, you're of the same ilk as Dr. Maggie's. Trying to detox a system. We've talked about this before. Trying to detox a system that, especially if they've got gut issues, right? Mm-hmm. They don't have good bowel function. If they've got bacterial overgrowth, if they've got high levels of beta glucuronidase already, what's going to happen to all those toxins they dump into the gut anyway? They're just getting recycled right back into the system, right?
Yeah, if you're constipated and you're dumping those toxins in the digestive tract, which should be eliminated, and you're not going to the bathroom, you're just going to reabsorb them. Not to mention that most people who have leaky gut are also going to have leaky brain. Their blood-brain barrier is going to be breached, and if those toxins get into their bloodstream, they have a good chance that it could get to your neurological tissue in the brain, which can create a whole host of neurological symptoms. And so, there's always a step process of, healing the body, and detox should be one of, towards the end, you got to get the body healthy enough to handle the toxins.
Absolutely. So I had a perfect example for that. I had a 10-year-old autistic child that I was treating, and the mom just would not leave any stones unturned. She was a super mom, but she had a hyperbaric chamber at home. They were doing chelation on the child, tons of probiotics, and the child had never spoken. And I said, we're going to stop everything. We're not going to give her any supplements. We're going to give her food. 30 days, she started speaking.
Wow.
She doesn't say sentences still, but the mom tells me that they were at school and she called her name and she turned around and said, what? And the mom was shocked. She said, wow, you spoke. Leave the brain alone. Let's get the toxicities out of there. Let's get you, foundation, right, Erica? Let's build that floor.
Yeah.
It's the power of healthy food. Now, I think I heard you say something. Some people may be shocked by that, and that is they were taking probiotics and you told them to stop the probiotics. Now, most people would think that if you have a gut issue, you should just load up on probiotics.
Absolutely not. So if you have leaky gut, I say, okay, so you put in these little life critters in your gut. You have leaky gut. Where are they going to go? They're going to go right through space as well. So I break it down as simple as I can for my patients, and I say they're going to poop and pee. So their endotoxins are going to be released, and they're going to lodge in wherever your weakest point is. So if you're having anxiety and depression, it could be a brain problem, besides the histamines, that also that they're going to release. So we do bring the probiotics back in after I measure the organic acid, and I do a SIBO test. Because also, we don't realize that when you take a pill probiotic, it doesn't reach the large intestine. It only stays in the small intestine, unless it's prescriptive assist, or there's a couple of them with prescriptions. But if you use fermented foods, then it gets to the entire system. So when we do the SIBO, or we do the organic acid, we can choose a probiotic better that way, knowing exactly where it's going to go. And the SIBO is going to tell us just if there's SIBO there, that could be the reason why they're not responding at all, especially weight gain. It is such a big deal for weight gain, SIBO. Yeah.
We were supposed to have do an interview on Tuesday. It just didn't work out. We're doing it next Tuesday with Gary Stapleton, who owns Aerodiagnostics, which is the company that does SIBO testing. It's the SIBO testing I utilize. You may use the same company. Great guy. So we're going to talk about that next time. But SIBO is huge, and people are often kind of confused. And Dr. Erica probably build on this is that they think, well, if I have any GI issues, I'll just take probiotics and that'll fix it. And especially as Dr. Erica was saying, if they have constipation, the probability of developing overgrowth. Some healthy bacteria is good, too little, not so good, too much, not so good. It's really about the right amount. And that's with almost every nutrient, every food, everything. It's not that something's good or something's bad. It's dose makes the difference, right? How much of something can be good or bad. We just need to find that sweet spot for everybody that's really an N of one. So Erica, do you want to kind of build on that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, the probiotics itself, I mean, people, they come in, they've been taking the same one for 4 or 5 years, and most of them have one strand of the bacteria. And so, you may have too much of that. And then the other ones that you need, because there's huge diversity in the digestive tract, they're not getting those ones. And so, instead of just keep wasting their money on taking probiotics, it's important to figure out, do you have overgrowth? And we've talked about this on other podcasts, there could be sluggish bile that's creating this dysbiosis in the small intestine. And, so you have to, again, look at the overall factors that play into all of this to be able to fully, make sure that you're giving the right probiotic. And sometimes it's it's not the probiotic itself, it's the timing.
The timing.
Yeah, the timing is huge.
Erica, how about when they come in and they're on prebiotics?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, a lot of these people, they're eating too much carbs and sugars anyways, and they're just feeding the bad bacteria, and it's that symbiotic relationship between the good and the bad, and you're killing your good off, and you're just feeding the bad. And so the diet has to be, you have to have the diet part too. That's a timing part as well.
It's the Goldilocks effect.
Yes.
So when I try to tell them when they're taking prebiotics, if their gut flora is not healthy, then they're making more of. So the pre is going to make more of whatever it's there. So if bad flora, they're making more bad flora. Mm-hmm. So
right.
We don't. Yes.
The prebiotics are specific only to keep the good flora under, in control, and that's what we see in SIBO when we run a SIBO test. Is a lot of times. Is what SIBO is for the listeners. If you haven't listened to one of the other podcasts, it's small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. It could be small intestinal yeast or fungal overgrowth as well. But when there's overgrowth of organisms in the small bowel, it can be just normal healthy flora that's overgrown, and that could be because of too much prebiotics coming into a system. And we talked about bile critically important. And if you have an imbalance of bile physiology, you lose some of that innate antimicrobial effect to kind of keep everything in check. So you can't just load the body with pre and probiotics and think gut's going to be in great shape. I get it. It's on the internet all the time. And for some people, it works great. I know Jane, your neighbor, it worked awesome for her. But it's necessarily going to work for you. And what we try and urge all the time, and I'm sure Dr. Maggie does this in her office, I'm certain I heard her allude to it, is we're all an N of one. So we all get to our state of dysfunction and disease for different reasons. And with the treatment that your Facebook friend used may have been beneficial for them, guaranteed, but that doesn't guarantee that it's going to be beneficial for helping you get better from a thyroid problem, an autoimmune issue, a fatigue issue, a weight issue. Everybody's different. And that's what's so difficult in functional medicine is that we aren't treating a box, a diagnosis. We are treating and trying to help an individual person. And the important part of that is individual, right? Individualized person. They are their own uniqueness.
That's why it's hard. That's why we don't make millions of dollars.
It takes a lot of time and work, and it is, sometimes I think people not because they're disrespectful or anything else. Sometimes patients come to the office and expect you to give them all the answers in one visit, and when you say, listen, we can't do that. This is going to be a process. It's going to take us 4, 6, 8, 12 months to undo what's happened to you over the last 20, 30, 40 years. They look at you like you're not being fair to them, when in reality, what we're doing is doing the best possible thing we could for them, which is peeling back the onion, addressing one aspect at a time, and getting at the foundational issues first, which I think is critical, right?
Well, I want to ask you guys a question. What would you say is the percentage of your patients that respond really well to this treatment of going basics?
100%.
If they commit to do
99%. I would say, no, I'd be fair. I would say it's probably, when you do the basic things, 80% of the people are going to get better, okay? There are about 20% of the people that I would say in my practice, and I think Eric and I talked about this before, the 20% is getting bigger, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So where it used to be a good 80-20 split, they would get better, and you really didn't have to do too much more than do the basics, do a basic gut program, maybe then do a little bit of detox and tweak a couple things, and 4 months, they're good to go. They're really doing great.
Exactly.
Now and it's for two reasons. One, I think we're getting sicker as a culture, so there's more damage coming to us. Two, the more sick people you take, the more sick people you attract. So we're getting more of the sicker and sicker people. And so now that 20% is now becoming 30, 40, 50%. And many of the patients, and I'll let Dr. Erica finish this up, is that they've already come to another functional medicine practitioner. They've been to 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6.
Yes.
They're still sick. And now we're saying to them, hey, you got to work on these lifestyle issues. And they've done 3 or 4 gut programs. So these are the hardest. Some of these people that we're seeing are some of the hardest of the hard, right? Yeah. Erica, you could kind of.
Yeah, they did. And you hit it right on the nail on the head, is that, it's the 80% is the people who you just get them to change their diet, they reduce their stress, you do the stuff that we talk about on this podcast, and they're going to respond great. But there are those people that they have tons of other things that's not on the surface, that it takes a fresh eye, for one. They can't do it on their own to see these things, to be able to make the necessary changes. And yeah, the more I do this, the more I'm attracting, at first I was like, these people, it used to be really easy. I changed their diet and this and that, and now the harder cases are coming in where I've got to, scratch my head and figure out, what is really going on, and we have to dig a little bit deeper, run a little bit further testing to be able to get them there. And it's not as easy as a pill, and so it does take time, but people are getting sicker, and so when a challenging case comes in, I love it, because it's a puzzle that I get to put together, and we get to move them through that journey. And the sicker they are, when they get better, it's such a huge transformation, and I love to see the way that it changes their life and everybody else's life around them.
Yeah. That's kind of my average too. You're right, they are getting sicker and younger.
Oh yeah, younger too. Just this past week, I saw a 16-year-old, a 15-year-old, I saw an 8-year-old the other day, and most of my patients are 60 plus when they're coming in to see me, and so it's getting younger and younger, and it makes me sad when I've got like a 20 or a 30-year-old sitting in front of me, and they're worse off than my 60 or 70-year-olds. Yeah.
I've got a toughie that came in yesterday. I wish I could consult with you guys. I think this is going to be my toughest case that I've ever had. It's a young man.
Well, you're always welcome to call. I know definitely me. I'm sure Dr. Erica would be more than happy. I do that all the time with people, is kind of give them my point of view, because I think that's important on cases. You just see with the different eyes, Dr. Erica was saying. Mm-hmm. It's interesting that kind of a tie into that point that you asked is, one of the questions that I get, and I'm sure you guys get the same thing, is how many people with my condition have you treated before?
Yeah.
Right? And I always say I've seen people with similar symptoms and similar problems as yours, but you're the first person with your condition. And some people are taken aback by that. Like, you don't have any experience with this? No, I don't have experience with you, because this is the first time you come in my office. But I've taken care of people with hypothyroid problems, but I don't know what your hypothyroid issue or gut issue. And so when somebody comes in and asks us if we've seen, have you ever treated a person with this condition before? Absolutely. Have I treated a person with the same situations that created your diagnosis? Absolutely not. Probably not.
And a lot of those patients are frustrated because they've been to other doctors and, they didn't get any better. It's because a lot of the times they ignored the foundational stuff, or they didn't go deep enough.
Yeah.
Yes, you are exactly like no one I've ever seen.
Right.
And that's a really important point, Erica, because I've had patients that fly somewhere to see a famous doctor, come back with bags of expensive pee, and I'll say, well, did it work? You never knock anybody down, because everybody has their own little paradigm that they're trying to work with. If it didn't work, then let's try this and see. Mm-hmm. And I say, don't throw all those supplements out. We'll use them. We're just going to time it. Don't waste your money. We're going to use those supplements. Don't buy new ones. But something that Eric and I talked about during the Seeking Health conference was broth. And I'm going to bring that up because when we go to foundation and being a GAPS practitioner, that is my first go-to. And I see broth as a symphony with all the right instruments coming together, and then it makes this beautiful music. Mm-hmm. And if we change one instrument, we change the symphony. So we don't exactly know synergistically how it works. And Dr. Natasha, who, I've had the pleasure of training with in person many, many times, she keeps studying broth. It's just, we just can't figure out synergistically what it is. But we know that it is in there. It is the collagens and the protein and the fat and the minerals and all that combination. But we can't just take a bottle of collagen and add, because then we change one instrument. Mm-hmm. Right. And a lot of people are a little afraid of broth because of glutamate, and that it's an excitatory hormone, so it can give you anxiety. But there's a way to get around that, and that is by starting with stock, first of all, instead of bone, and only cooking it for less than 2 hours, and the glutamate will not be released. So I start my patients that have anxiety with just stock, and we cook it for an hour and a half, and that's it. And it works. Good point. And with the children, sometimes I start with drops. I tell the mommy to take a medicine dropper, put it in their mouth like little drops, and we'll build on that. But Dr. Natasha has had children on broth only, no other food, broth only for 2 entire years.
Wow.
And they recover from their autism, and they thrive, and they do beautifully.
Yeah, I think that's probably a topic that, unfortunately, today we probably don't have the time to dig into, but we'll have to get back on and get into that. I do want to touch on one other thing that I know was something you wanted to talk about, and is one of the things that I have an interest in really getting more information on, and I've tinkered with actually bringing it into my practice, and that is the thermography. I think we're doing a real disservice to women in what we're doing with evaluations, especially all the radiation we're doing to their breasts and squashing them in between machines to try and figure out if after we squash them and radiate them, is there any damage, right? And we do that for year after year. And then when we see damage, we go, we finally found it. But maybe some of the stuff we're doing in the process to identify it is part of the problem as well. So are you doing thermography in your practice? Is that, or is it something you just refer to?
I have many passions. And that was one of them. So ionizing radiation, we know that causes changes to the DNA.
Right.
So who thinks that was a good idea? But in their defense, the world is not flat anymore. We know it's round. So mammograms had their place, and it probably did save lives, but it also probably cost lives.
Yeah.
So in 2009, the United States Task Force on Preventive Services, are you familiar with the task force?
I've heard of it.
I'm not. Yeah.
So every country has a task force for different things. And we have one that their job is to evaluate things that we have been recommending as screenings. The mammograms, the PSA, the BMIs, and they grade them from an A to an F. And in 2009, they gave the mammogram a D, and they no longer recommend it as a screening tool. Now, there's a place for it, but each woman has to discuss it with her doctor and see if the risk outweigh the pros on an individual basis. But no one over 72 and only 50 and over if there's merit for it. 2009. And yet it hasn't reached mainstream because, well, we know why.
Right. There's too much money behind what we're doing already.
Follow the money trail. But mammograms are an early detection diagnostic test. They are not a prevention test.
Right.
Yeah.
Thermography is prevention. Thermography will see breast cancer 10 years before a mammogram. And how it does that is that it can see angiogenesis, which is the formation of new vessels, which a tumor needs in order to survive once it arrives. So that process takes 10 years. And it uses the dermatomes, which is right up your alley, right? It uses the dermatomes to diagnose.
I love the science behind it, and as I said, I just wish I had more time to dig into that. I think it'd be a great service to have. I've tinkered with it on and off, but I just haven't been able to give that time. But, with a wife whose mom had breast cancer, to me, that seems like the best way at this point right now with the technology we have to be evaluating people early to look for the signs of potential development versus waiting for the actual mass or the tumor to actually be present. Again, that's end stage medicine. I know we call it preventative, but really it's still end stage. And maybe that was the best we had for a while, but we have to be open to new technology and say, hey, there's something better now. We have to kind of move on to that.
So, it is an FDA registered test since 1982.
Yeah, but I think, and I don't know because I haven't spent enough time looking into it. For the vast majority of people, they want to use insurance when it comes to healthcare with their healthcare. Yeah, right. Is it an insurance covered service? Do you know? Yeah, it's
not. But there is a billing code, and I give that code to my patients, and they file it out of network, and they get reimbursed. Some of it they get it back.
Okay.
So the biggest obstacle is it's the money. So women will say, but the mammogram is covered by my insurance.
Absolutely.
But it can kill you. So,
right. Yeah, prescription opioids are covered by insurance too, and they're killing people and destroying this country. So, want to be healthy or do you want to not pay for stuff? It's up to you. So let's do this because we're kind of running through on our time, and I love talking to you. We're going to have you back on because this has been a blast to do this. But one of the things we want to do is maybe finish with a couple final points before we let you go. What would be from if we talked a lot about gut function, we talked a lot about, and we kind of tailored a little bit of that towards thyroid function. What would be your kind of general 3 top recommendations for any listener who has some thyroid issues, they're struggling with thyroid issues? What would be your top 3 recommendations, general recommendations for almost anybody who's struggling with hypothyroid symptoms?
I think they're going to be the same for anybody who's struggling with any kind of disease. First of all, your thoughts, which we didn't get to talk about that, but your thoughts are very important, and being grateful and having a grateful attitude every day, it'll go a long way, believe me. Then anti-inflammatory diet. So if you could do only one thing anti-inflammatory is stop grains. Just stop all the grains. And that's going to go a long way. Be thankful, don't eat any grains, and have fun.
Awesome. And I think those are all great points. And they go to the kind of the fitness factors we talk about on a regular basis. Mm-hmm. Definitely what goes on in your head, you can manifest into your life almost anything you spend the majority of your time thinking about. And if you're thinking about illness and sickness, you're probably going to manifest more illness and sickness in your life. And it doesn't mean
absolutely.
It doesn't mean that you're creating your own illness and sickness, but oftentimes, if you're focused on the solution, you find a solution. If you're focused on the problem, you just find more problem.
Yeah, you're always moving towards the things you think about. And so if you think bad things, you're moving towards bad things. That's why people think, well, it always happens to me, or, oh, they're thinking that, so they're moving towards it. So of course bad things are going to happen because they're always thinking about them. If you think positive things and you think, I'm going to get healthier, I'm getting healthier every day, those are the things that you'll move towards. And so you move towards things you think about.
That's why we're getting sicker patients, because we think about helping people that are sicker. But I tell my patients, think about this. If your problem has a solution, why worry? And if it doesn't have a solution, why worry?
Absolutely. So that's a great way to kind of finish this podcast up. It's been a blast for me.
Great.
We had a great time doing it. I'm sure our listeners are going to enjoy everything from today's discussion. We'll finish this up with letting you, Dr. Maggie, tell people where they can find you, how they can get a hold of you, what your website is, how can they get in contact with you if they want to talk?
My website is drmaggie.com or thrivecare.com. Oh, I'm being corrected. .org. Thrivecare.org. I don't even know my own website. I'm too busy with my patients.
That's all right. I'm
in Sarasota, Florida, and I am in Winter Park, Orlando.
Great. And then, Dr. Erica, let everybody know where you are again.
You can find us on Instagram at Doctors Riggleman. You can find us at brainandbodyhealthcenter.com, and then also Brain and Body Health Center on Facebook.
I want to thank you guys for the mission that you're on. You are helping more people than you can even imagine by just making this information available to everybody. You have You have quite a journey, the two of you. Thank you.
Well, thank you for coming on here and sharing your perspective of it, because they don't want to hear us talk all the time. They need fresh voices and new perspectives.
So we'll finish up with that. It's been, again, as I said, it's been a blast. If you're listening to this on iTunes, please take a couple minutes and give us a review. If you have any questions regarding anything we talk about on the podcast, wherever you watch this podcast, there's probably a comment area below. Just comment there, and we will respond to you. You can reach out to Dr. Maggie at her office, Dr. Erica at her office, or me at my office at chronicconditionrecoverycenter.com, or you can find me at thyroidproblemsdoctor.com, or you can find me on YouTube, because I'm always doing a Thyroid Thursday video and talking about something. So thank you so much, Dr. Maggie, for coming on. Dr. Erica, as always, it's been a pleasure. Another podcast, and without a doubt, we're going to ask you to come back on in the future. Okay, Dr. Maggie?
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for coming on.
All right. Thank you, Erica.
Thank you.
Sign us off.
Yep. Bye.